The sun rose over the bustling city of Ilorin, painting the skies with hues of amber and gold. It was a typical weekday morning. Car horns blared, street hawkers called out their wares, and school children in neat uniforms rushed to catch their buses. Among the early risers was Ade, a 30-year-old man whose life was finally falling into place. Tall and broad-shouldered with skin the color of roasted cocoa, Ade had a quiet confidence. His gentle eyes, framed by thick lashes, always reflected purpose. He worked as a project supervisor at a reputable construction firm and had recently been promoted after overseeing a successful estate build. Life was good. He had just 4 months to go before tying the knot with his fiancée, Ifeoma, a nurse he had met 2 years earlier during a visit to the hospital after a minor work injury. Their love had grown quickly but deeply, anchored in shared dreams and quiet understanding. That morning, Ade kissed his mother on the forehead before stepping out of the house. She had raised him and his 2 younger sisters Tolu and Saad since their father passed over a decade ago. Ade had become the man of the house early, shouldering responsibilities with grace. His mother, a retired schoolteacher, always blessed him as he left for work. Her faith in prayers was as strong as his own belief in hard work. "God will go before you, my son," she whispered, her eyes lingering on him. "Amen, Mama," Ade smiled, adjusting his belt. "Tell Tolu to stop drinking all the juice in the fridge before I return." His mother laughed. It was a normal day. Nothing hinted at what fate had prepared. The bank he passed daily on his route to the office stood right at the corner of Unity Road. It was just after 8:30 a.m., and the sidewalks were already crowded. Ade slowed down as traffic thickened ahead. Vendors moved between vehicles, selling bottled water, face towels, and newspapers. As his car approached the bank's vicinity, he noticed something unusual: people running in different directions, some ducking for cover. Before he could process it, gunshots rang out. Panic spread like wildfire. Screams tore through the air. The armed robbers had arrived in 2 black SUVs, their faces masked, their rifles blazing. They sprayed bullets indiscriminately into the crowd to create confusion and fear. Cars skidded off the road, people crawled under tables and gutters. The chaos was unthinkable. Ade, trying to reverse and flee the scene, instinctively opened his car door to warn a fruit seller just a few meters away from the line of fire. He shouted her name, "Mama Kemi, get down," just as a stray bullet pierced his chest, just below his left collarbone. He staggered backward, collapsing beside his car door. The world around him spun. The sounds faded. All he could hear was the frantic beat of his own heart slowing down. People ran past him, jumping over his body. The fruit seller screamed in terror, dropping her tray of bananas and oranges. Ade's blood stained the pavement, pooling around his side. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Ifeoma. He never answered. By the time the police arrived, the robbers had escaped with an undisclosed amount of money. Several people were injured. Ade was one of the few who didn't make it. News spread quickly. The television and radio stations broadcast the story with somber voices. "Armed robbery in Ilorin claims the life of young engineer," the headlines read. Ade's family rushed to the police station to identify the body. His mother collapsed upon seeing him. The sisters wailed uncontrollably, held back by neighbors who had come for support. The days that followed were filled with pain. His dreams, his wedding, his future all buried with him. The community mourned him. At the wake, elders spoke of how rare it was to find a young man like Ade, respectful, hardworking, and deeply rooted in family values. His boss at the construction firm choked on his words during his tribute. Ade had a vision. He always talked about building affordable homes for widows. Now that dream is gone. The burial took place on a quiet Saturday morning. The rain threatened but never fell. His grave was dug behind his mother's compound, beside the mango tree he had planted as a teenager. As they lowered his casket, a strange wind blew across the yard. Birds scattered from the tree, and the leaves rustled violently despite the stillness in the rest of the town. People said nothing, but some whispered, "His spirit is not at rest." His mother couldn't sleep for days. She said she saw him in her dreams, standing in the doorway, watching her silently. Sometimes she would rise in the middle of the night and walk around the compound calling his name. "Ademi, Ademi." But time moved on. Ifeoma, shattered by grief, left Ilorin for Abuja and never returned. She carried a necklace he gave her and wore it every day. Ade's sisters found ways to cope, returning to school and work, their brother's death etched forever into their hearts. His room was locked and left untouched, as if he would one day return. Yet far away from Ilorin, in Port Harcourt, something inexplicable happened. A man, 30 years of age, woke up in a guest house near Transamati. His name was Ade. He remembered nothing of his death, nothing of Ilorin, but he spoke fluent Yoruba and English. He had a strange familiarity with numbers and architecture. He had an instinct for drawing house plans on napkins and sketch pads. He remembered being Ade. And somehow he was Ade again. He checked into a modest apartment and within weeks found an opening with a small construction consultancy. His knowledge was uncanny. Clients loved him. His projects were clean, his structural suggestions ahead of their time. Within a year, Ade had moved into a small duplex and was living comfortably, though quietly. But he was different. He never posted on social media. He had no contact with any relatives. He had no origin he could explain. No birth certificate. No school documents. When asked about his past, he smiled and changed the topic. He spoke softly, walked slowly, and avoided crowds. Sometimes he disappeared when he sees familiar faces that could land him in trouble, yet no one noticed him. The new Ade didn't question how he got there. He just lived. He wasn't running. He wasn't afraid. But somewhere in his mind, there was a whisper, a shadow of a life before this one. A mother's hug. A girl's laughter. A bullet. Blood. But the memory stayed buried for now. Port Harcourt's morning air was thick with the scent of diesel, roasted corn, and distant ocean breeze. The industrial city pulsed with energy, yet Ade, now nearly 2 years into his new life, maintained a rhythm that was noticeably slow and calculated. He had risen from obscurity into mild prominence in the world of construction without making much noise. His projects stood tall across the city's small apartment complexes, commercial plazas, and even a waterfront housing estate, but the man behind them remained elusive. Veronica entered his life unexpectedly. It was at a project inspection site in Elikahia, where Ade was assessing the foundation of a soon-to-be school building. Veronica, the civil engineer assigned by the Ministry of Education, walked in with boots muddied from the previous site visit. Her confidence struck him before her beauty did. She spoke directly, with clarity and intention, asking questions many would have shied away from. At first, Ade barely responded. He watched her like one remembering a dream, as though some part of her belonged in a life he had lived before. "You don't talk much," she noted during their second meeting. "I talk when necessary," he replied with a calm smile. Veronica was intrigued. Within weeks, coffee breaks turned into lunch dates. Lunch dates melted into evening walks. He cooked for her once a pepper soup that reminded her of her late uncle's secret recipe. She laughed at how he squinted when chopping onions and how he always double-checked the door locks twice before bed. "I don't know why," he said one evening, "but I feel like I've done all of this before. Loving someone. Losing someone." Veronica tilted her head. "Who did you lose?" Ade paused. I don't know." His face showed no pain, only the absence of memory where meaning should have been. By their 3rd year together, they married quietly. No extended family. Just 2 witnesses from the city registry. Veronica wanted more introduction, traditional rites, church blessing, but Ade insisted they keep it private, for now. He promised that in time she would meet his people. She had met none. Not even a single cousin. "Ade, who is your mother?" she once asked in frustration after he evaded yet another family question. "My mother was a schoolteacher," he said slowly, then blinked. "But I don't know where she is now." "You said was. Is she dead?" "I don't think so." "So where is she?" "I don't know, Veronica. Please." The topic ended with silence and sometimes his soft humming. Always the same tune. Veronica once recorded it on her phone and tried to search for it online. Nothing came up. By the time their children Tosin and Zena turned 1 and 3 respectively, Veronica began insisting that the family connection must be addressed. "You're not an orphan. You're not an alien. Someone gave birth to you. Someone raised you. We can't keep living in this bubble. I've told you, December. This December, I will take you home." "To where?" "To Ilorin." The name left his lips before he even thought about it. A shiver ran down his spine. Veronica stared. "Ilorin? You're from Ilorin?" I think so." That was the beginning of everything unraveling. In Ilorin, it had been 6 years since Ade's death. His mother had aged, her once full black hair now snowy white. She still walked with the help of a cane, but insisted on doing her own cooking. The house was quieter now. Tolu had gotten married and moved to Lagos. Saad remained in Ilorin, helping their mother manage the family's small provisions shop. Not a day passed without Ade being mentioned. His picture still hung in the parlor, placed on the wall beside their father's. "He was my firstborn," his mother would say to visitors, voice filled with pride and grief. "The one who never gave me trouble. Until that wicked day." Ade fall into a deep sleep where he traveled to Ilorin with his family. When Veronica and Ade finally made the trip, it was early December harmattan season. Dust danced along the roadside, and the cold breeze chilled the air. They drove from Port Harcourt in a black SUV, the children asleep in the back seat, their little heads bobbing with every bump. As they entered Ilorin, Ade grew quiet. His fingers clenched the steering wheel tightly. Every corner, every streetlight, every mosque tower seemed to stir something deep within him. At some point, he slowed the car and turned to Veronica. "I need to use the toilet," he said. "Just give me a minute. There's a corner there, wait for me." He crossed the road and disappeared behind a cluster of trees beside a large compound. Veronica waited. 5 minutes. Then 10. She called his phone. Switched off. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. With panic growing in her chest, she stepped out of the car and walked toward the compound near where Ade had vanished. She approached the gate. It looked familiar. A small mango tree leaned over the fence. She knocked. An older woman came to the door slowly, aided by a young girl. "Good afternoon, Ma," Veronica said, heart pounding. "Sorry to disturb you. I'm looking for my husband." "Your husband?" the woman asked. "Yes. His name is Ade." The older woman's face froze. "Ade," she whispered. "Yes. He stepped away just a while ago. We were driving in. He said he wanted to ease himself. I waited, but he never came back. I got worried and—" The old woman suddenly reached for the doorpost, her legs trembling. "You said Ade?" "Yes," Veronica replied, now fully anxious. "Please, this is him." She opened her phone gallery and showed a picture of Ade holding their children at a birthday party. The young girl standing beside the woman let out a small cry and ran into the house. The woman touched the photo. Her hand trembled. She began to cry. "This is my son, my Ade. He died 6 years ago." Ade woke up, and then he prepared for the worst. The December harmattan had arrived, brushing Port Harcourt with its dry winds and misty mornings. Trees stood still under the haze, and dust clung to every moving vehicle. Ade sat on the veranda of his duplex, sipping a cup of tea, staring into nothing. It was 6 years since he had mysteriously awakened in the oil city. 6 years of quiet progress, private thoughts, and silent questions. Inside the house, Veronica was busy preparing the kids' breakfast. The twins Chisholm and Chinidu had just turned 4. They filled the house with life, energy, and unending curiosity. Veronica, ever patient, balanced her duties as a mother and a part-time HR consultant. She was beautiful, strong, and determined. But lately, her heart had been restless. "Are you still planning to travel next week?" she asked as she handed him a plate of yam and egg sauce. Ade nodded slowly. "Yes. Ilorin, remember?" Veronica leaned against the wall, watching him. "You've postponed it so many times. Why now?" He looked up at her, the morning sun catching the slight silver in his beard. "Because I owe it to you. And to myself." She said nothing, but her eyes softened. They had been married for 5 years, and yet she knew so little about his past. He never spoke of parents, siblings, childhood, nothing before the day they met at a site inspection in Elinwo. It was as though he had no history. "When I get there," he added, "everything will make sense." The journey from Port Harcourt to Ilorin was a long one, over 12 hours by road. Veronica had packed snacks for the children and arranged their bags meticulously. They left early in the morning, Ade behind the wheel, Veronica beside him, and the twins asleep in the back seat. The farther they drove, the more pensive Ade became. Familiar sights stirred something in him: a market sign, the curve of a hill, the smell of roasted corn on the roadside. It felt like déjà vu but deeper. Like watching a life you once lived through fogged glass. Veronica noticed his silence. "You okay?" He nodded but didn't speak. His grip on the steering wheel tightened. They arrived in Ilorin late in the evening. The city had changed but still felt like an echo. Ade drove past Unity Road, the very street where his life had ended 6 years ago. The road was wider now, the bank had been renovated, but something gripped his chest as they passed. They checked into a modest guest house near GRA. Veronica was exhausted, but Ade sat outside alone, staring at the stars. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he scrolled through his phone, looking for a name he didn't know he still remembered. Ifeoma. He typed it in Facebook's search bar. Dozens of results. Then one stood out. A profile photo of a woman with tired eyes and a nurse's cap. Her last post was 4 months ago, a quote about moving on from grief. Ade's fingers trembled. He didn't send a friend request. He just stared. The next morning, Veronica was more excited than usual. She wore a vibrant Ankara dress, packed the twins into the back seat, and prepared to finally meet Ade's family. "We're going to see your grandma and aunties," she told the children. Ade drove them toward the tank area, his eyes scanning every corner, every shop, every compound. It was all coming back: his childhood school, the field where he played football, the kiosk that sold the best fried plantains. They finally reached a familiar street. Ade stopped the car and pointed toward a compound. "That's it. My house, or at least it was." Veronica frowned. "Was?" He smiled faintly. "Give me a minute. I want to urinate." She nodded. "Hurry. I'll get the kids out." Ade crossed the road slowly, his mind in a whirl. He walked past the gate, turned a corner, and suddenly paused. The house was the same. The paint had faded, the fence looked older, but the mango tree stood tall, its branches now thick and wide. He turned to the left side of the compound where the graves were. His feet moved without thinking. Then he saw it. A small marble headstone. The grass around it had grown, but the name was clear. Adekunle Ibrahim Adebayo. Born March 6, 1986. Died November 21, 2019. Beloved son and brother. Ade's knees buckled. He collapsed to the ground beside the grave, clutching his chest. He couldn't breathe. Sweat poured from his forehead, and for a moment, the entire world turned black and silent. I died," he whispered. This was me." Veronica waited in the car for almost 45 minutes. When Ade didn't return, she grew anxious. She called his number, it was switched off. She called again and again. Nothing. Panic swelled in her chest. Grabbing the children's hands, she made her way to the compound. An elderly woman opened the gate. Her eyes, tired but alert, studied Veronica. "Yes. Good afternoon, Ma. I'm looking for my husband, Ade. He said this is his family home." The woman's expression shifted to confusion. "What did you say his name is?" "Ade. Adekunle. He said he lived here before." Another younger woman walked out, curious. Veronica introduced herself again, this time pulling out her phone. "Look, here's his picture. My husband. He was here just now." The phone slipped from her hands as she watched both women cover their mouths in shock. The older one began to cry. "No, it cannot be. That's our son, he died 6 years ago." The compound was in chaos. Neighbors had come out, drawn by the commotion. Veronica, unable to process what she was hearing, felt her knees go weak. "What do you mean he died?" They took her to the back. She followed blindly, her hands shaking. Then they showed her the grave. And the photo on the tombstone. It was Ade. Same face. Same eyes. Same man. Her heart shattered. She fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. The children, confused, clung to her. "Mummy, why are you crying?" One of the sisters, Tolu, touched Veronica gently. "Please come inside. Let's talk." Inside the house, the story spilled. Tolu and Saad told her everything: the robbery, the bullet, the burial. They showed her old photos. Ade in a graduation gown, Ade holding a birthday cake, Ade beside the mango tree as a teenager. It was undeniable. The man she married had lived and died in this very house. "He even planted that mango tree," Saad added, her voice quivering. "But how?" Veronica whispered. "He doesn't remember any of this. He told me he had no family." Tolu wiped her tears. "Maybe he really doesn't remember. Or maybe he wasn't allowed to." They searched for Ade until late evening, but he had vanished. The guest house staff said he never returned. His car was still parked on the street, keys in the ignition. Veronica stayed with the family that night, her mind battling grief, confusion, and fear. Her children slept beside her, unaware of the deep mystery surrounding their father. The next morning, a letter was found under the family gate. No stamp. No name. Veronica opened it, hands trembling. "I now understand who I am. But I cannot face you all, not yet. Please forgive me. Give the children my love. Tell Mama I saw the mango tree. Ade." The wind swayed gently through the tall grass around the grave, whistling low and mournful. Tolu stood silently in front of her brother's headstone, holding the letter he had left behind. Her eyes followed the words again, as though they might suddenly reveal more than what was written. Tell Mama I saw the mango tree. She looked up at the branches, lush and heavy with fruit. Her younger brother, the one who had died, had planted it himself when he was 12. And now he had returned as a man, only to vanish once again, like mist at sunrise. Port Harcourt, 3 weeks later. The house felt different. Veronica stood in front of the mirror, her fingers brushing her reflection. The children were asleep. The lights were dim, and the bed once filled with his warmth felt like a forgotten island. She had told the twins that Daddy had gone for work. A long journey. They believed her. She didn't know how long the lie would hold. Veronica stared down at her wedding ring. She hadn't taken it off. Not yet. How could she? How does a woman mourn a husband who is neither dead nor alive, who had died before she met him, yet still held her hand in another lifetime? She walked into the study, sat in his chair, and opened his drawer. Beneath a pile of documents was a faded journal. It wasn't written much, just short scribbles and thoughts. Sometimes I dream of a tree. It calls me. There's a smell I remember, like old dust and palm oil. Familiar. I feel I've lived before. Maybe I have. She closed the book and wept silently. Somewhere in Benin City, Ade watched the marketplace from a distance, seated at a small buka with a plate of jollof rice. He wore a cap pulled low over his forehead, his beard now fuller, with more white streaks. His eyes no longer darted around in confusion, they were sharper now, more certain. He had accepted the truth, though he had no name for it. He was a ghost with flesh, a memory clothed in skin. The dreams had become vivid again. Every night, the mango tree appeared. Every night, a voice called out, "Come back." But he wouldn't. He couldn't. He had buried himself already. Going back meant tearing open a wound that the world wasn't ready to understand. In this new city, he taught carpentry. Quiet work. No names, no past. The men who worked with him called him Brother Cunnel. It was close enough to the truth to feel safe. And yet, each time he carved wood, he remembered Veronica's eyes, how they glistened with strength and grace. He remembered Chisholm's laugh and Chinita's tight hug. He missed them, but he didn't reach out. He couldn't let his past and present collide again. Ilorin. The grave was now covered in fresh flowers. Tulu had started tending to it daily. Mama rarely came outside anymore. Her health had declined sharply since the visitation. She didn't say much, but her eyes searched every shadow. Every knock on the gate sent her heart leaping. Every boy that passed reminded her of her son. Maybe he wasn't meant to stay, she murmured one afternoon. Tolu, sitting beside her, said nothing. I had prayed that my son would not die in vain, Mama continued. And somehow he came back. But heaven, it does not let the dead linger long among the living. Back in Port Harcourt, Veronica had begun therapy. It was her friend, Gloria, who insisted. You can't carry this storm inside you alone, she said. So every Thursday, Veronica sat across from Dr. Aluko, a middle-aged psychologist with kind eyes and a voice like rain on a tin roof. How did you meet Ade? He asked one day. She smiled faintly. At a building site. He was the lead contractor. I was there with my boss for inspection. He offered me plantain chips and said I looked like someone who needed rest. Sounds like a gentle soul. He was and still is somewhere. She paused. Sometimes, I think he knew he wasn't meant to stay. Why do you think he left? Veronica sighed. He saw his own grave. Saw the face of the man he used to be. And maybe it was too much. Do you resent him for disappearing? A long silence. Then she shook her head. No. I miss him, but I don't resent him. I think his soul just needed to close a door. And maybe it couldn't close if we all stood in the doorway. Benin City 2 months later. A child fell from a bicycle, scraping his knee, and began to cry. Ade rushed from the woodshop, lifted him gently, and cleaned the wound with water. You'll be fine, my boy. Strong boys don't fear small cuts. The child smiled, wiping his tears. Ade watched him run off again, and then turned back toward the shop. It was becoming his sanctuary. Each nail driven, each joint carved, it all quieted the storm in his chest. But sometimes late at night, the silence crept in. He would lie awake, eyes open, hand on his chest, wondering. What happens when your soul belongs to 2 lives? Veronica's home, 6 months later. Veronica had finally told the children the truth. In the gentlest words she could manage, she explained. Daddy had to go far away. He didn't leave because he doesn't love you. He left because he has another journey, one we don't understand yet. They cried. She cried with them. But a strange peace followed. Children, unlike adults, accept magic more easily. Will he come back? Chinita had asked. I don't know, she replied, holding his small hand. But if he does, we'll be here. Ilorin the anniversary. 1 year had passed. Tulu organized a small memorial for Ade. The neighbors came. They offered prayers, poured libation, shared old stories. The mango tree stood tall, now surrounded by small benches carved with Ade's name. As the sun set, Mama stood by the grave one last time. My son, she whispered. I saw you again, and I thank God. I release you now. Go wherever heaven calls you. We will be fine. And for the first time in years, she smiled. Port Harcourt 2 weeks later. The letter arrived. Veronica read it under the same mango tree Ade had planted years ago in their compound, a tree he never remembered planting. She touched its bark and smiled through her tears. He's gone, she said softly. But he lives in everything he touched. And with that, she walked inside, held her children close, and let the winds of time carry the rest. The sun rose quietly over Ilorin that morning, casting long golden shadows across the compound that once echoed with confusion, mourning, and revelations. Veronica stood by the window of the guest room, her eyes following the sway of the mango tree as the breeze whispered through its branches. She had hardly slept. There had been no word, no call, no clue, just a letter, a final silence. And now only questions remained. The twins, Chisholm and Chinidu, were still sleeping, their tiny limbs entangled in the unfamiliar sheets. They had not understood why their father had not come back. They didn't understand why their mother cried in quiet corners, clutching a piece of folded paper. Veronica had held herself together for them, because mothers must. But within, her soul was unraveling, thread by thread. She turned from the window and began packing. Tulu, the younger of the two sisters, stood at the doorway. Her eyes were red from the night's search, her face drawn and still disbelieving. You're leaving today? She asked gently. Veronica nodded. Yes. There's nothing more to wait for. Will you keep in touch? Tulu asked hesitantly. Veronica paused, considering the question. Then she nodded again. Yes. For the children's sake. They have a family here, whether they know it or not. There was a long silence. Then, they embraced two women bound by grief, confusion, and a love they shared for someone who had become a ghost in both their lives. Back in Port Harcourt, life resumed with a strange stillness. Veronica returned to work, placing the twins in daycare. She told no one about the trip. When colleagues asked about the journey, she smiled politely and said it was a family reconnection. No one pried. But inside, something had shifted. She stopped checking the gate for signs of his return. Stopped dialing his number. She erased the chat thread where they used to share memes and late-night whispers. It was too painful to scroll up and see his words. Instead, she focused on work. On building routines. On healing. Each day became about movement, wake, dress the twins, attend meetings, return, dinner, bedtime stories, prayers. Repeat. But each night, when the children had drifted to sleep, Veronica would sit on the balcony with a glass of water and look at the stars. The same stars that watched over Ilorin. The same stars that watched him wherever he had gone. 2 months later, an invitation arrived. Tulu was getting married. The card was traditional, folded in cloth, sealed with gold ink. Veronica stared at it for a long time. It felt like a test, an invitation not just to a wedding, but back to the heart of mystery. She considered refusing. But in the end, she packed up the twins again and traveled north. Ilorin welcomed them with warm harmattan winds. The Adebayo family had prepared a small guest room for her, now affectionately called Veronica's Corner. Tulu was radiant in her pre-wedding glow. She hugged Veronica tight. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "I wouldn't miss it," Veronica replied. The wedding was grand, vibrant with Yoruba drums, food, and dancing. Chinidu wore a tiny agbada, Chisholm a golden iro and buba. They danced with cousins they had never met, laughed with relatives they couldn't yet understand. And for a moment, Veronica felt light again. During the reception, Mama Adebayo took Veronica aside. The elderly woman looked much older now, her movements slower, her words fewer. But her eyes held strength. "You are part of us," she said softly. "No matter what happened. Whether we understand it or not." Veronica nodded, fighting back tears. "I feel it too." Back in Port Harcourt, the winds had shifted. Rain came early that year, washing the streets with sudden, heavy downpours. Veronica's work had increased. 2 new HR contracts meant longer nights, earlier mornings. The twins had begun asking deeper questions. "Mummy, where's Daddy?" She would smile sadly. "Daddy traveled. When will he come back?" She kissed their cheeks and whispered, "Someday." And in those moments, she hated herself for not knowing if it was a lie or a wish. To ease their confusion, she began writing a storybook for them. It was filled with fictional tales of a lion king who disappeared but left gifts behind, of twin stars who danced through the skies searching for meaning. She printed the book at a small press and read it to them every weekend. One night, after finishing the last page, Chisholm looked up at her and asked, "Did the lion ever come back?" Veronica closed the book, stroked her daughter's hair, and replied, "No, but his roar was heard in the wind." And that was enough. Over time, people stopped asking questions. Neighbors adjusted. Friends moved on. Veronica moved to a new house, one with less memory in its walls. She painted the walls sea blue, filled it with indoor plants, and put up paintings that celebrated strength and rebirth. The children adapted quickly. They were now in school, making friends, speaking pidgin and English with boldness. Every Saturday, they visited the library. Veronica encouraged reading, writing, and drawing. She started a small reading club for children and began leading workshops for single parents. Her pain had become her power. Her wound had become a well of wisdom. She never remarried, but she smiled more now. She laughed easily. She danced at weddings. She planned vacations. Yet on some nights, when thunder cracked open the sky and the power flickered out, she would sit by the window, watching the rain, and whisper to the dark, "I forgive you, wherever you are." 10 years passed. The twins were now in their teens, curious, bold, talented. Chisholm loved music and could play the piano like magic. Chinita wanted to be an architect and spent hours sketching futuristic houses. They excelled in school and often talked about studying abroad. One evening, while going through old files in her computer, Veronica found a folder labeled Port Harcourt Beginnings. Inside were photos, smiling selfies, beach outings, birthdays. A video clip began playing. The twins learning to walk, stumbling toward a laughing figure behind the camera. The voice in the video echoed, "Come on, you can do it. One more step." Veronica watched silently, tears slipping down her cheeks. She didn't stop the video. She let it play until the laughter faded into silence. Then she closed the laptop and whispered again, "Thank you." Years turned to decades. Veronica grew older. The twins left for the UK to pursue their dreams. She retired and moved to a quieter part of town. There, she planted a small mango tree in her backyard. Every morning, she watered it. Neighbors often saw her talking to the tree. Sometimes she'd say, "They're doing well. You'd be proud." Other times, just silence, as she watched the breeze shake its leaves. She wrote a memoir eventually, titled Roots Beneath the Rain. It told the story of love, loss, motherhood, and mystery. It became a bestseller among Nigerian women's circles. Book clubs invited her. Universities studied it. But nowhere in the book did she mention a name. Just the man who was then wasn't. Veronica passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 79, surrounded by grandchildren and letters from across the world. Her mango tree stood tall, shading the courtyard where neighborhood children played. Her life had been full of sorrow, yes, but also of triumph, love, and rebirth. At her funeral, Chinita gave a speech. "My mother taught us that life isn't about answers. It's about grace in the unknown. About carrying love even when you don't understand why it disappears." Chisholm sang a song. It was soft, haunting, beautiful. The breeze rustled through the trees. And far away, somewhere beyond names and timelines, a soul found rest. If you enjoy our videos, please take a moment to follow. Subscribe to our channel to stay updated on our upcoming stories. Thank you.